Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to tackle a huge question. When you look at some massive global corporation, who is actually calling the shots? We're going to peel back the layers on corporate governance by looking at two totally different ways of running the show. Seriously, think about it. It's a simple question, right? But the answer is, well, it's complicated. It's not just about the CEO. It's about the entire system, the entire structure that decides who has power and how big decisions get made. So let's dive in and unpack that system. So let's start with this term, corporate governance. Don't let the name fool you. It's not some abstract, boring theory. Think of it more like the rule book for a company. It sets out who's in charge of what they're allowed to do, and maybe most importantly, how clearly they have to tell the rest of us, investors included, what's going on. Okay, to really see this in action, let's look at our first case study, General Electric. For GE, governance isn't just about taking boxes on a form. It's an active, ongoing discipline. It's something they do. The whole idea at GE is built around this concept of stewardship, not management. The board's job isn't to get bogged down in the day-to-day grind. Nope. Their role is to be the guardians of the long-term vision. They're there to make sure the ship is pointed in the right direction. And that creates a really clear line between overseeing the company and actually running it. And you know what's cool? GE boils down this huge, massive responsibility into just three core pillars: strategy, risk, and people. That's it. Are we headed the right way? Are we safe from big company-killing threats? And do we have the absolute best people to make it all happen? That is their entire focus. This chart just perfectly illustrates how that plays out. You've got the main board at the top. They're the guardians of the big picture for the whole group. They decide on the values. They decide where the money goes. But then the boards of the individual businesses, they have the freedom to manage their own specific markets and actually get the job done. It's this fantastic balance between central control and local know-how. All right, so that's the GE model. Pretty clean, pretty clear. Now let's flip the script and look at a completely different way of doing things. We're heading to Hong Kong, where corporate structures are often way more complex. And that's by design. So instead of that direct GE approach, you often see these pyramid-like structures. It's layered. The company you actually buy shares in, it might be based in the Cayman Islands. And that company owns another company in, say, the British Virgin Islands, which then, finally, owns the actual business that's operating in Hong Kong. Now, it's really important to get this. These complex setups aren't necessarily some shady scheme. They often have very legitimate, very smart business reasons behind them. Things like being more tax efficient or isolating risks so that if one part of the business has a problem, it doesn't sink the whole ship. And a really key feature is that it allows a founding family or a small group to keep control over a huge company without having to own a majority of the shares. And right there, that's the big challenge. When you've got this maze of different companies all stacked on top of each other, how can an outsider, an investor, possibly figure out who is really calling the shots? This kind of complexity puts a huge, enormous weight on one single thing: how well the company explains itself. Which brings us to the real heart of the matter here. At the end of the day, the specific structure a company uses, whether it's flat like GE or a pyramid, that's actually less important than how clearly they explain it. It all comes down to what we can call the transparency test. So let's put these two philosophies right next to each other. On one hand, you have the GE model, driven by this idea of active stewardship, where the main goal is clarity. On the other, you've got a model that's often driven by the efficiency of control, where the focus is more on just meeting the minimum legal requirements. Two very different paths to the same goal. This quote just absolutely nails the modern expectation. It's not enough anymore for a company to just say, hey, trust us, we're well run. That doesn't fly. Now they have to prove it. They have to demonstrate it through crystal clear communication and a structure you can actually understand. Okay, so let's bring this all home. What does this whole tale of two different governance models actually mean for you? I mean, whether you're an investor, or you work for a big company, or you're just curious about how these massive entities really work. So when you're sizing up a company, how do you actually apply this transparency test? What are the telltale signs of good governance versus a structure that might be designed to hide things and confuse you? It really all boils down to two things. Just two. First, can you look at their reports and easily understand the basic shape of the company? Can you draw the org chart? And second, once you see that chart, can you trace how power and authority actually flow through it? Because at the end of the day, that is the gold standard. A company with strong governance is one where you, as an outsider, can clearly see the lines. You can understand how a risk down at the factory floor gets reported up the chain, and how accountability for that risk flows right back down from the boardroom. And that is the final thought we want to leave you with. The next time you look at a company you're interested in, ask yourself this one question. Does its structure feel like a glass house where everything is open and you can see right inside? Or does it feel like a maze where you're challenged to find your way through all the complexity? The answer to that question will tell you almost everything you need to know.